This video is going to be all about taking you from the God's eye view that some of these modeling and sim tools offer you, deep down into the actual physical properties of the satellites that make up the space domain. We're going to build a satellite, we're going to print a satellite, and then maybe we'll even destroy it. Stay tuned. The software that we're going to use to design a satellite like this is called Blender, which you can download for free online. And let's just go ahead and jump right in. Okay guys, let's go ahead and get started and build out our first satellite, everybody's favorite Milstar. So before I get started, I first need to turn on a couple add-ons. The main one that we need for this build is going to be Node Wrangler. So if you just go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and type Node in, you want to make sure Node Wrangler is activated. You might make sure that 3D Print Toolbox is also available to you, and then Images as Plane. Import, Export, Import Images as Planes. Each of those might be important as we kind of do some design here with our satellite. Okay, with that in mind, let's go ahead and just disable some options. We don't really need the grid or the floor. We want kind of a nice blank space to help visualize our satellite. Okay, anytime we're going to be doing some modeling, I first like to review some source documentation and get some references. So a lot of different artists' interpretations of what makes a Milstar satellite. Some of the key things you can see here are going to be these three sort of rectangular objects where most of the payloads are hosted, essentially making up the primary bus. You've got these crosslink antennas that are aligned on these sort of struts. Got some nice long solar panels that are about as wide as the vehicle. Got some UHF antennas, some square antennas, and some circular antennas kind of scattered around. And above all else, you have a lot of gold.
I love gold!
So with these references in mind, I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is keep this standard starting cube, and we're just going to go ahead and move it up in the z-axis. So red line there, that's the x-axis, green is going to be y-axis, and blue, which you can't see up and down, that's the z-axis. Some of the tips that I love to use when I'm using Blender is using the center mouse wheel to kind of rotate my camera around. If I do Alt and center mouse wheel click, I can also change the center of the camera. That'll make more sense as we start to edit things out. Okay, so first things first, we need to take this cube and turn it into sort of that characteristic Milstar shape. So let's go ahead and hit Tab, or we can also change this object mode to edit. And now we're in a different editor that we can go ahead and manipulate our object properties. We're going to change to face view. We're going to select this face. I'm going to hit G, and then I'm going to type Y, and that's going to constrain movement to the Y axis. G basically is the same as clicking this move icon over here. So just clicking this face, hitting G, hitting Y, and then we're going to stretch it out until we get something that looks kind of like the center of a Milstar. Already looking great. Next thing I want to do is right click our object and do set geometry to origin. That'll just be good when we're trying to build out some symmetry. If I just have it kind of centered exactly on the origin, it'll make it easier to do symmetry. All right, now I'm going to take this object and do Control C, Control V. I'm going to drag this down, and then I'm going to move it over to this side here. Now we kind of got the basic makeup of the one side of the Milstar satellite. I'll just hit Control C, Control V. Now I got another one of those, and I'm just going to use that symmetry to our advantage and just do a negative Y, which will place the other one exactly the same distance as the first one. Great, we can already see we're starting to see our Milstar shape emerge. Now we need to go ahead and start to add out some antennas. So I'm going to do Alt and wheel click on this side of the vehicle so that I can kind of move the camera over here, and we'll start to build out some different antenna parabolas. So I'm going to go ahead and add an object. We're going to, before I do that, I'm going to do Shift right mouse click so that I can move this sort of target icon here. Now anything I add is going to add here, so I don't have to go searching for it when I add objects later. So we'll do Add Mesh, and we're going to add a UV sphere. I like UV spheres because they edit pretty well into our eventual shapes. I'm going to click that UV sphere, hit Tab to go back into edit mode, and we need to turn off faces and go back into nodes here. And now we can also turn on X-ray mode so that we can kind of see through the object. Just select some nodes here, hit X, delete all those vertices. Okay, so we're slowly building this shape down into our eventual antenna here. I like a little bit of precision, so I'm going to go ahead and select this node here. I'm going to go to Select, Side of Active, change the axis to Z. Everything positive of that node will be deleted, and hit X and delete our vertices. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and just call that our standard antenna. All right, so we turn off X-ray mode, go back into our object edit mode, and now we've got sort of our first parabola antenna built out. Eventually I'm going to be 3D printing this model, so I'm going to go ahead and add some thickness to the shape that was built by Blender. Most of Blender's shapes are like impossibly thin, so really difficult for a 3D printer to kind of add those in a layer by layer sense. So what we're going to do is click on the shape, we're going to click this kind of purple wrench icon, add a modifier, and we're going to do a solidify. Maybe take this up to something like a 0.3. Okay, it's looking nice and girthy now. I think that's probably good. We'll go ahead and click apply. And now we've got sort of a parabola that has some depth, but it's looking super 1990s polygonal. So I want to take some of those polygons out. I'm going to go ahead and click the object again, add another modifier, and we're going to do subdivide surface. This basically takes your polygon and cuts it into smaller polygons to give you more resolution. So we'll do that 3 times. That's already looking pretty smooth, and there you go. We've got a nice smooth parabola. Next thing I want to do is rotate this object around the y-axis so it's facing down, essentially in this frame towards the earth. So we'll type R, then we'll do Y, and then we'll type 180. It's just going to turn our parabola upside down. All right, next thing I want to do is start to align some of these dishes to locations on the Milstar satellite. So go back to some of our reference icons here. Yeah, this Lego one's pretty good. So you got 2 large circular antennas and then 3 smaller circular antennas beneath that. All right, so we'll go ahead and build out our first large circular antenna. So we want to go to the -Z. I think we'll make this slightly larger, and we'll bring it down into the actual body of the satellite so we don't get any depth perception issues. It's a little bit low, so we'll move it up a little bit, and we'll copy paste, and now we got 2 of those. Okay, so those are kind of centrally located on the -Z. So go ahead and move this down a little bit, move this over a little bit. That looks pretty good. Now we need 6 smaller ones. So go ahead and make another one. We'll scale it down until it's looking small enough that it will fit just underneath the 2 larger satellite dishes. And we'll go ahead and just copy paste this 6 times. Okay, great. We've already got sort of the basic of our payload starting to align. Bring these down to the payload bus. And now we've got our sort of MDR payload side already kind of built out. All right, next thing that we're going to do is move over to the other side of the satellite. Looking at the Lego model, we've got sort of this square, a smaller square, and then a taller square, 2 UHF antennas, and then 3 smaller antennas. So we'll go ahead and model those out. I'm just going to go ahead and click Shift right click so that I can bring that target over. We'll add a cube. Again, I'm not really focused on the height of these objects. I just want to kind of get them proportionally correct in the center of the satellite, about to the size that I'm kind of seeing from my basic scale. So the first one is going to be this set of cubes. I think it looks kind of something like that. And then there's a smaller one that's about half of its size. So we'll go ahead and make one of those. And then there's a slightly larger one that is taller than the rest. So we'll go ahead and make that. Okay, these 2 to the left of the screen right now are slightly shorter than this taller one is. Let's just go ahead and we'll click on the object, hit tab, go to face select mode, select that face. We'll do GZ and bring it down, tab back out, click the other one, tab, click the face, GZ, bring it down to about that height. And maybe we just bring this one down just slightly, GZ, and that's looking pretty good. All right, so I need 2 helix antennas and then a couple other dishes surrounding these kind of square shapes. So we'll go ahead and go to object mode and select one of these parabolas, copy paste, bring it over to this area, and we'll start to build out that sort of overall payload deck. All right, looks like we have 2 UHF antennas that are kind of spread out from the vehicle, so we'll go ahead and make those really quick. And then we have sort of a trifecta of parabolas kind of flanking these overall square shapes. I'm just doing copy paste and then kind of moving these approximately into the position that they'll be sort of finally. It looks like the UHF antennas are slightly offset down, so we'll go ahead and offset those down. And I think actually what I'm going to do, because I'm going to build the helix out for the center of this antenna, I'm just going to delete the other one, and then we'll kind of build from this single antenna and then copy paste it later. So before we do that, why don't we just go ahead and click save so we can kind of lock in all of our progress. Okay, so to add the helix, we're going to do a shift right mouse click. We're going to click Shift A to add an object. We'll add a mesh, we'll add a circle, and now we're going to turn this circle into a screw object. So we're going to click this wrench icon, we'll click a modifier, and we're going to click screw. Take that screw out about 3 meters, and we're going to screw, if you will, along the x-axis. And there you go. So the way this modifier works is it just rotates whatever shape you started with. In this instance, we started with this circle around an axis until it kind of hits however far distance you went. So right now that axis is too close to the center of the circle, so we need to move that axis out. So we're going to go to Options, click Origins, and we're going to start to shift the axis that is shifting around. So if we go down in Z, you can kind of see we spread that screw open. And if we go over in Y, we kind of make it go around a more central point. I think all things considered, that's looking pretty good. So we'll just go ahead and now send this out the number of iterations that a normal UHF winding would be. Something like 10 probably will give the overall appearance look that we're looking for. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We'll turn off Origins. Okay, before I do any editing, I first need to kind of apply our object here. So we'll go ahead and click Apply. Now I want to clean some things up. I'll go to Edit Mode. We're going to select this edge here, and we'll do Select Loops, Edge Loops, grabs that circle, and we're just going to push F to fill it in. That way it doesn't kind of end at sort of this infinite space here. We'll do the same thing with the other side. So click this little edge here, do Select, Select Loops, Edge Loops, click Fill, and there you go. Sweet. So now we've got a pretty decent sort of spherical antenna here. Only problem is it's literally 20 times bigger than our satellite. So we'll go ahead and shrink that down into about the final shape that we think it's going to be. Something like that. We'll move that over to the dish that it's going to land on, which is going to be that one. And we're going to go ahead and rotate this around the y-axis 90 degrees. Go into the -Z and try to line that up with the center of our parabola. And we'll just bring that kind of down there. And I think that's looking pretty okay. Maybe bring it back just slightly. Great. Now we'll just copy that and we'll paste it and we'll move one over to the other side. As long as we're here, we may as well build out the support for those antennas because pretty soon we're going to switch over to the trusses, painting the vehicle and the solar panels. And I like to just get all of the basic foundational work done first. So shift right click, click add. We're gonna add a mesh, we're gonna add a cylinder. Cylinder is a nice object to support what we're trying to build out here. Maybe take it down to like a 0.21, sure. And then we're gonna go ahead and rotate that by Y, 90, looking pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and scale X, stretch that out. That's looking great. Gonna center it. Bring it back underneath our objects here. I think what I want to do is move these up slightly. So it's kind of going through the center of the bus. Move this up a little bit more. That's kind of touching the bottom of our parabolas. All right, so all things considered, I think that looks pretty good. I think I might move these other dishes down just slightly, just to kind of give a little bit more dimensional space between them and the UHF antenna. Looks great. As long as we're here, let's go ahead and support these antenna dishes. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a plane. Kind of put it about there. Bring it just under supporting one of these. Move that in a little bit. Okay, so the square looks nice and all, but it's not very interesting to look at. So we'll go ahead and click Edit. We'll go to Node Mode. Click one of these nodes. Click the movement icon. Just kind of bring this in just a little bit. More of a trapezoid look. I think that looks a little bit more distinct and kind of interesting. Okay, we're going to go ahead and push A to select all. We'll hit E for extrusion. We'll push Z so that we only extrude in the Z. And then we'll just bring that down to give it a little bit of depth. Tab out, Control C, Control V, bring one over here. Control C, Control V, bring one over here. R, Z, 180, just to kind of rotate it. And we'll align it underneath this dish here. Okay, just a few more things to build out, and then we will start making this satellite gold. Gold! All right, so the first thing that we need to build out are sort of the N struts that kind of make up the left and right bounds of the satellite. So go ahead and do shift right click. I'm gonna go ahead and add a mesh. We'll add a cube. Cube's gonna be a good feature for this build out because we're going to turn it into sort of this lattice structure to make up the overall struts of the satellite. Looking at some of the different sources, it looks like the struts on one side are slightly longer than the other. So we'll go ahead and see if we can't replicate that. So the first one, we'll just make a square, and for the other one, hopefully we'll remember to make that some kind of rectangular shape. Okay, we got our square here. We're gonna add a modifier. We're gonna select wireframe, and we're going to turn that into maybe like a 0.1. That's looking okay. Maybe something more like a 0.3. Normally I wouldn't go this thick on the wireframe lattice, but I know I'm going to 3D print this, and the more I can give the 3D printer to bite into, the better. So go ahead and click apply there. It's not looking too bad. We'll scale it down just slightly to fit better on the square. And there we go. Okay, let's go to the other side, and we'll go ahead and add that sort of slightly longer rectangular square. So shift right click, click add, mesh, cube. Depth perception is an issue, so we'll go ahead and align that kind of the edge of the satellite. And for this one, we want to do a scale Y and just stretch it out just a little bit. Gives us just a slightly longer cube to turn into that wireframe. Okay, so just like before, we're going to go ahead and add a modifier. Wireframe, the other one we did a 0.3, so we'll be consistent. 0.3. We'll go ahead and apply that. Scale it down just slightly, and okay, there we go. All right, next thing that we want to do is take a look at sort of these crosslink antennas. It looks like they're kind of mounted on this kind of pyramid style shapes somewhere off of the side of the satellite. All right, so it looks like the one on the LDR side is kind of in a pyramid, and the one on the block 2 side is going to be sort of this stretched out pyramid. The LDR side one looks like it's kind of mainly centered on the actual bus, whereas the other one looks like it goes through the actual struts. Cool, so that shouldn't be too hard to recreate. So what we're gonna do is shift right click, add, we'll add a mesh, we'll add a cube, bring that cube over, and this one looks like it's kind of centered just off of the end of the bus. So kind of replicate it like that. Click this object, go to tab, edit, and I wanna make sure I'm in node select, and I wanna get these top nodes, and what I want to do is type M to merge them, and I want to merge them at the center, which is going to kind of create a nice little pyramid shape. Bring this down just slightly and move it over just slightly, and that's all there is to it. Now we've got a nice pyramid. We'll do the exact same thing we've been doing before, which is to wireframe it. Give it a 0.3 and just scale it down just slightly so that it fits on the body of the satellite, and there you go. We've got one of our 2 pyramids done. Go over to the other side, and we'll build out sort of that stretched out elongated pyramid. So shift right click, add mesh, cube. Depth perception still is an issue. Okay, and this one looks like it's kind of slightly off of the end of the satellite. So we'll kind of do something a little bit like that. Go ahead and we'll modify it, wireframe it. So before we do that, we got to turn it into a pyramid. So we'll do edit. We'll get these top nodes, merge them at the center. We want to push this top one out kind of almost to the edge of the satellite. I want to get these 2 nodes down here, kind of bring them back just slightly, and call that good. Now we'll wireframe it. Going to give it a 0.3 on the thickness. Click apply. Scale down just a little bit. Okay, next thing we want to do is add our parabolas in there. So Control C, Control V on one of the random dishes that we have. These are going to be by far the largest, so we'll just scale those up slightly. And we want to give this one some random rotation, maybe something like that. Obviously, the real satellite is going to have an entire structure and base that all of this attaches to, but I think for now, that's probably going to be good enough. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So copy, paste. Zoom in, rotate, and there you go. We got some pyramids that are kind of pointing out into space. Good time to click save. Okay, just one major item remaining, which is going to be the center of our satellite and our solar panels. So first I want to, before I build out the panels, I'm just going to finalize sort of the support structure for the panels, and then we're going to colorize the entire satellite, and then we'll build the panels as kind of the last step, just because the material that we're going to use for our solar panel is going to be the most complex of all of them, and I want to make sure that we kind of lock in all of our shapes and our transforms before we do that. Okay, so shift right click. We're going to go ahead, add, mesh, cube, bring our cube up, move our cube kind of central, scale it down to about 60% of the center of the bus. Scale it in the Z, shrink it down. Okay, that's looking not too bad. Maybe just scale it up slightly. Okay, we want to grab maybe one of these supports that we're using for our solar panels and kind of bring that through the center of the satellite. Scale that down just slightly, enough that it kind of fits into the center of whatever we're calling our control arm. So the normal Milstar satellite is just going to kind of sever at these edges, but again, I'm going to be 3D printing this later, so I want to make sure that I provide some additional support for the printer to bite into. So I'm just going to go ahead and stretch this out, essentially the entire length of what will eventually be the solar panels. Sweet, and with that, all of our steps of building out the baseline model of Milstar are done. Go ahead and click save, and let's start to color this bad boy. Okay, first and foremost, let's go ahead and color the helix antennas. Those are going to be the easiest because we're just going to put some shiny silver paint on them. So click on one of these helixes, and we'll go ahead and click this circle here that is material properties. We'll add new. We're going to leave it silver. We're going to crank metallic all the way up to 1. We're going to crank roughness down to something like a 0.13. Then we'll go ahead and render that, and you can see, oh yeah, nice and shiny. We're going to go ahead and say that's good enough, and we'll just apply that material over to our other helix antenna, and that's it, we're done. Alright, so we could do a very similar thing for the bus of the satellite and make it gold, but a real Milstar is going to have a lot more complexity in the actual color of the gold, because it has sort of this foil structure to it. So we want to kind of capture that sort of appearance as much as possible, which is going to require us to do a little bit more difficult of a material build. So what I'm going to do is whatever you've got kind of on the bottom of the screen, I'm going to drag that up. I'm going to click whatever type of icon it is, and we're going to turn it into a shader editor. We're going to click on the actual sort of bus of the satellite, and you can kind of see, if you can see it on your screen, you got this thing called principled BSDF, which is the same thing as what you see over here on the right side that we just did with our helix antenna. It's really easy to do what we're going to try to do with our goldness here. We're going to go ahead and just change our base color to something of a gold, which is going to be like a kind of a combination of brown, orange, and yellow. We're going to crank the metallic all the way up. I think we'll go with a roughness of 0.2. Kind of see it's already looking pretty shiny gold, but we want to add that foil look. So to do that, we need to add some noise. So we'll go ahead and add a noise texture. And then we also want to add a bump, which is in vector. So we'll go ahead and add a bump. We're going to take the normal out of the bump and put it into the normal of our color. And then we're going to take the factor of our noise and put it into the height of the actual bump. And so there you go. We kind of have this sort of random pattern that is giving us a little bit of the eventual shape that we want. Now we want to scale this down, and we want to scale this up slightly, maybe something like a 10. Take the roughness down slightly, add some more detail, add a lot more distortion. Distortion is basically building sort of the randomness of that foil shape. We can kind of change the distance of the bump slightly, make it a little bit smoother. We can also adjust the strength down a little bit. Okay, so now this feature effect right now that you see is not fully rendered. Let's take a look at what this would look like in a full rendering. Kind of see that we got the basic kind of color that we were looking for. And we can do a lot more with this sort of shader editor to turn this into more of a gold foil. But I think for about 30 seconds of work, that's probably good enough. So okay, let's go ahead and start coloring out the rest of the satellite. So we're just gonna go through, click objects, go into their material, and then add that gold material that we just built out. We want everything to be nice and gold, true to the nature of Milstar. All right, now we got a nice shiny gold satellite. Look at that, beautiful. Okay, for our final step, we're gonna go ahead and build out our solar panels. And part of the reason why we waited so long for this step is because this is going to be a lot more complicated using the shader editor, and I didn't want to lose you guys. But principally, we're gonna do something very similar to what we just did here, adding a lot of different textures that will build out the actual solar panel. Because this can be a little bit more complicated, I wanted to build the material first before I built the structure of the solar panels. That way, when I stretch everything out, it doesn't kind of mess up the material that I built. There are ways to work around that, but that's kind of just my method to keep everything nice and clean. So go ahead, click add, and we're going to add a plane. And for this plane, we're going to go ahead and click New. We're going to click with our Principled BSDF highlighted. We're going to do Control T. Just going to give us a couple additional boxes that we can edit. So one is image texture. If you already have a nice image for what you're trying to build out, then you're pretty much done here. You can just go and find a solar panel image texture and throw it in there. But we're not going to take the easy way out. We're going to do something a little more complex. So delete that, we can delete this, and now we should just have mapping, texture coordinate, and material output. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is add a Voynier texture, which is some kind of fancy map, and we're going to go ahead and add a color ramp. For the color ramp, we're going to plug the color into the surface, we're going to plug the mapping into the vector, and we're going to plug the distance into the factor. We're going to take all the randomness out, we're going to make our color ramp constant, and we're going to take the white scale down to something around like a 0.6. Okay, that's looking pretty good. That's basically what I'm looking for. And now I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to hit the Voynier texture, do Shift D, and duplicate it. And I'm going to duplicate my color ramp for my scale. I want something like 8.2, and I want to make sure I get that scale on my other object as well. This one's going to be a distance to edge. I'm going to plug the vector from our mapping into this vector here. The distance will be into the factor. We're going to move our material output back. I'm going to swap black and white on this one. And just to show you kind of what this is doing, if I plug this one in, it's adding grid lines. The first one added sort of these contact points, these sort of triangles, and this is adding grid lines. And now we're going to combine the two of those together. So Shift A. Converter math, we're going to do an add. One value we're going to add is there, and the other one we're going to add is there, and we're going to hit clamp. The scale of those lines is a little bit too big to see all the contacts, so bring that down a little bit, maybe even less. Okay, now we got kind of a basic wafer chip for what a solar panel build out would look like. There's a lot more you can do, and there's a lot of tutorials that kind of teach you how to make solar panels, but I'm just going to call that good enough. And now we're going to change the color of these different grid lines to match kind of what is characteristic of Milstar. Ironically, although a lot of these kind of depict Milstar with these classic blue solar arrays, the true Milstar is going to have some nice gold solar arrays, because Milstar loves gold. So let's just go ahead and build out these solar arrays to be gold. So now that I've got sort of this grid texture all built out, do Shift A, and we're going to add a shader, which is glossy, and we're going to add another one. One of them is going to be sort of this dark orange, and the other one is going to be kind of this golder color. Now I want to do Shift A again, and I want to mix the two of those together. So we're going to go ahead and move one of the shaders in there and one of the shaders in there. Okay, and now that we've got all of that, we're going to go ahead and add our factor there. And now what you can see is with these two glossies, which kind of move those down so not all of our lines are intersecting, we've got the kind of contact points and the grid lines kind of merging, and they're going through some different color changes. We can make these a little bit shinier, and maybe that one's a little bit too orange. Maybe make it a little bit more gold. Maybe make this one just a little bit darker. Something that ultimately is easier to see on the screen. Okay, that's looking pretty gold, pretty Milstar. Let's just call that good, and we'll get back into the final build out of our satellite. So what I want to do is move that sort of solar panel texture down underneath the solar panel struts. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to go to options and make sure I do correct face attributes. This is part of why I built out the material first, so that when I kind of stretch this object out, it's going to maintain the pattern that we built out. So we'll click all, we'll click E for extrude, hit X, and we're just going to extend out our solar arrays. Okay, so now we got sort of the length of the solar panel set up. I want to get these to be a little bit thicker. We'll do scale Y and kind of move those out slightly, a little bit wider. And then let's just go ahead and bring that down until it's kind of resting right on top of that solar panel strut. Looks great. And we'll just copy paste that. And with that, we're done. Congratulations, you guys just made your first Milstar satellite. So now that we have the satellite built, we're going to be 3D printing this. But let's just go ahead and throw this into some of our softwares, see how it compares. Okay, so to first export our satellite, we'll go ahead and go to File, we'll do Export, and let's just first check out how our satellite looks within STK. So we'll use this GITF 2.0. That's one of the formats that STK can understand, and we'll just go ahead and export that right to the old desktop. Now we'll jump over to STK. If you go to 3D graphics model, you can choose AGI's version of the Milstar model. Just go click these ellipses and find Milstar. We'll also go ahead and build up our own model here. So go to model, and we're going to find the one that we just built on the desktop. And let's just get a look side by side. Okay, so on the left side is AGI's model, and you can agree that theirs might look a little bit more detailed than ours. They also have home court advantage, so their foil model loaded more correctly, whereas ours did not. And you can kind of see how Blender exported the model for our satellite that basically looks blue and gold. We didn't get any of that kind of foil effect that we built out actually in Blender. However, there's one thing that you can say about ours versus AGI's. Ours is bigger.